But let's
Cheers.
Cheers.
Ooh, I like that.
Oh yeah, that's really rich.
That was really refreshing. It's like I would equate to drinking like cold water.
Yeah, right. It has like a very refreshing aspect to it, and
Yeah.
it's funny because it's a rich flavor, but it's not really like heavy or overpowering.
Yeah. God, that is really good.
Shogo, you made a nice decision.
Thank you for this.
Yeah. で、他になんかやっぱり飲んでほしい日本酒がありましたら、ぜひ、スーパーチャットとかで、有料チャットで、まあ、寄付していただければ、we'll buy it and we'll try it. I'm looking forward to the next
me
one.
too. Oh my gosh. You guys are way better at picking sake than we are.
That's so true. But today, you wanted to talk about a specific thing because what did you do recently?
Yeah, so I went back to the U.S. Well, actually, we both did, right? But you talked about your experience last time, and I wanted to talk about my experience. So recently, my sister has moved to a city in Washington called Ellensburg. And
does Ellen live there?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sure at one point.
Yeah.
But so if none of you know Ellensburg, I'm not surprised because it is a very, 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 very small farm and college town in the middle, like literally the middle of Washington. And
that's not where Wazoo is.
No, it's Central Washington University, which is known to be like a teacher school.
Okay.
So it's a really good college actually. Mm-hmm. Just to give a little bit of backstory, because I learned this and I was excited to learn this. So the capital, many people think that the capital of Washington is Seattle.
Yeah,
right.
But it's not.
And I don't blame people for thinking that because in Japan, usually the biggest city in a prefecture is like the capital of the prefecture.
Right.
Right. But in America, it's not really that case.
Yeah, except for Massachusetts.
Fair.
We're special.
Yeah.
Sorry, please keep on going. I'm done saying we're better than you, but
but in Washington, the capital is a place called Olympia, which is another middle of nowhere town.
Yeah.
I have literally never been to Olympia.
I went there and I was surprised at how little there was. There was like the state building, and that was about it.
Yeah.
Fields.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But back when they were deciding the capital of Washington, it was between Ellensburg and Olympia.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess Ellensburg is more central.
So here's the decision, and I learned this from my brother-in-law. So one city was going to get a university, and the other city was going to be the capital. And so Ellensburg was set up to be the capital of Washington, but then there was a huge fire. It burned the entire city to the ground.
Really?
And so they decided to make Olympia the capital.
I guess it rains more, so.
Yeah. And so Ellensburg got the university after that, which I think has worked out pretty well for them because Central Washington is like a huge university now. So, but yeah, so I went to stay with my sister and her family. And, like I've always lived in the suburbs, right? We've been kind of closer to the countryside, but still living in the suburbs. And this was an opportunity to live on a farm that I haven't had in a long time.
So when you say a farm, can you explain how much farm like it was? Like what makes it a farm?
I mean, my sister has like everything that you could think of that when you think of a farm. I mean, she's got giant fields of stuff that you plow to harvest. Like, you know, I think she's growing hay right now for horses, which is really interesting. So Ellensburg is really famous for hay, and all of the hay grown in Ellensburg comes to Japan to feed animals over here.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So a lot of farms here in Japan are actually using hay from
Ellensburg,
where my family is living.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Isn't that cool? It's like, it's so cool to find like attachments to Japan, even in the middle of nowhere when I'm going back to the US.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was so cool. But yeah, she's growing hay right now. She has a bunch of horses. She's got chickens, like all these animals.
Does she have a cow?
No cow.
Not yet.
No cow, but there's cows literally everywhere around us. Like the next door neighbors have like 50 cows. And constantly you'll like have to stop and watch cows like cross the road and stuff.
Wow.
So
it's really as they say in Japanese, inaka.
Yeah.
You know, it's really farmland.
Yeah.
So, but what was it that made you want to talk about this topic and share with everybody?
Something that really dawned on me
Yeah.
when I went back, and I was kind of like, hanging out at my sister's house. We'd go into town, and I kind of just like absorbed my environment. Is it really made me realize that once you get out into these small towns, how similar Japan is to America.
Really?
Right? So like I was watching how my sister interacts with our neighbors, right?
Mhm.
Or her neighbors. So we went and watched it wasn't a rodeo, it was like cow catching. I forget what it's called. But basically it's this kind of game where they release a cow
Mhm.
and it like runs out in the field, and like two people on horses have to go like lasso it.
Lasso it and catch it. Okay.
Yeah. And so, that's just something we just went and visited the neighbors and watched them do that.
Okay.
And it was like this really casual, like everybody knows who they are or like each other is. They know what's going on in their lives, they're friends, and it's like, people are helping out. It's like, oh, you want to ride horses? Yeah, go on, come on over. We'll help you out with that. And like people know each other in town. And it's just like a really friendly and welcoming atmosphere. And I never really got that when I lived in America.
Yeah, well, I mean, so like suburbs are kind of like weird.
Yeah.
I feel like so I don't know, maybe this is wrong. I mean, I know that there are definitely suburban areas in Japan, but I feel like it's much more extreme. It's either you're in the city or you're in the farmlands or the fields, the rice fields, pretty much. But like in America, there's so much suburbia where it's neither or. It's just basically there's not really any shops. Maybe you have like a little small downtown center, like one road that has the basic shops that you need.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's just people living there, and they'll commute somewhere else. To work.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one thing is like, if you look at how communities are set up in America, there was this really big push for the nuclear family. And I don't mean nuclear as in like nuclear bombs or whatever, but it's set up like a nucleus, right? It's like a cell, right? So it's like you have these walls, and inside the cell is your family, and everything else is outside, right? And that's how American communities are set up, right? So you go into the suburbs, and it's like you don't really know who your neighbors are.
Yeah, you don't really talk to them either. Maybe when you move in, you'll say hi, but then you don't.
Or at most you'll know who lives like directly next to you, but you're not gonna like walk down the street and be like, oh yeah, that's Carl and Nancy, but you go into the really small towns in the US, and you see that, and it just really kind of opened my eyes. That's like, I had this idea and a perspective on what American culture was, and it was completely changed in this last trip. And it's kind of funny because it's like I really experienced reverse culture shock. Like as an American, I'm like, wait, this is American culture? What?
No, dude, I get it. Every time I go back, I feel less and less at home. Over there, over in the States. And I mean, I get it. So you're from Bothell, which is close to Seattle, which is it's very suburban. It's not rural at all, right?
I would say it's like it's like on the rural side of suburban. Like we have farms and stuff in Bothell. Like, and it's very like there's so much nature there. But at the same time, it's like it still has those like core elements of suburban life. Yeah.
I mean, so I grew up in suburbia the entire time, and basically just nothing but houses around me. You walk or you drive 10 minutes to get to the shopping area or whatever. But I was always struck by how private everyone was and how people don't talk with their neighbors so much. Except we did talk with our neighbors like on one side, but then our neighbors on the other side, we had like a feud with them because of like properties issues stuff. So we didn't really talk to them. But it's like I feel like in Japan, because even when you're out in in smaller towns, the houses are really packed together. Like whereas in the States, you have a lot more space, kind of like as a hedge. You have little hedges guarding you, right? So it's almost like that atmosphere leans itself towards being isolated from other people.
Yeah.
You know?
One other thing that I really noticed, well, I guess I just kind of started thinking about after getting back was people talk about nature here.
Yeah.
And man, the nature in the US is pretty good.
Yeah.
We got, like, when I got to my sister's place, so just to give you some idea of what Washington looks like, Washington is cut in half by a mountain range. And so what a mountain range is this big line of mountains that kind of goes from Mexico to Canada.
Okay.
These are the Cascade Mountains. They're a huge mountain range in the U.S. And so Washington's cut in half by the Cascade Mountains. So on the left side of Washington, you have Seattle, and it's a very rainy, like...
Yeah, the mountains keep the clouds over on that side.
Yeah, there's a lot of green there. And then you go to the right side, which is eastern Washington, and it's like a desert.
Yeah.
Right? It's very dry. There's fires in fact, there was a fire while we were there. We got smoked out for 2 days, so we couldn't even go outside.
Wow.
So it's really dry.
Yeah, just as a side note, so I've never been to Eastern Washington.
Yeah.
But I did spend some time in Montana.
Okay.
Which is like further down there, and I was surprised at how dry everything was. I grew up next to the ocean, pretty much, and I just remember having to use like chapstick every day, and if I didn't, my lips would bleed because it was so dry, and I was thirsty all the time.
Yep.
It was something that I never experienced before. I thought I would be fine, and after the first couple days, it's like, but when you talk about it being dry, it really is dry.
Yeah, it's really, really dry. And you have to deal with fires every year. You have to deal with fires every year, and that's, I think, like, giant forest fires is really unique to America.
Yeah.
Because like pretty much no other country has to deal with that except probably Canada.
Yeah.
But in America, usually during the end of summer, if you live in a dry place or near it, like even in Western Washington, you'll experience this. You have to accept that there's usually a week or two out of the year where it's dangerous to go outside because of the smoke level. Like it actually can hurt your lungs.
Especially on the west coast.
Yeah.
Western side.
So that's just something you have to deal with. And I probably Australia deals with this too, but like, it's crazy.
It's funny. So you talk about nature, because I remember people talking about how beautiful the nature in Japan is.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because, as I live here longer, some things that I didn't understand, I now understand and I appreciate a lot more. Like one thing I appreciate is the architecture and the way houses are built here, whereas before I didn't understand it. But I'm still trying to figure out the nature side, because I remember people saying, "Oh, look, there's a waterfall over here. Let's go see it."
Yeah.
And it's like a little trickle. It's like not really big waterfall. Whereas like, hey, let's go see a waterfall in the States, and it's huge.
I will say though, man.
Yeah.
If you want to see some real cool waterfalls.
Yeah.
So Oita down in Kyushu.
Okay.
Like Oita is a really cool place. And I'm a little bit biased because my wife's from there. But it's really cool. Like they have so many badass waterfalls.
Okay.
They look really good. And they're really big too.
Yeah. Oh, so I mean, so that's one thing. But so how would you categorize how the biggest difference between the nature in the States versus the nature you get here?
You know what? I actually feel like I have a pretty good answer to that. And I want to preface my statement by saying I don't think either is better.
Yeah, it's different.
Okay. I like the nature here in Japan and I like the nature in the US. But the way that I would put nature in Japan compared to nature in the US, I would put it as like observing details in a painting is Japan.
Okay.
Right? And then going to an art gallery is nature in America.
Yeah.
That's how I would compare it.
Yeah.
Like here in Japan, I think, like, obviously Japan is much smaller than the US.
Yeah.
And when I look at nature here, it's like you're going to a specific place to see a specific thing, right? And that's why I say you're looking at details in a painting, right? You're not necessarily going to be wandering around this huge park. You're going to be going, we're going to go see this waterfall at this park, right? Or, there's a mountain that we're going to specifically, right? Whereas in the U.S., it's like when you go to observe nature in the U.S., you're taking everything in.
Yeah.
Because the place that you're going to is often so massive that it's impossible to go to every point at the park.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's what I mean. It's like going to an art gallery versus looking at details in a painting.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. I feel like, because I went to the Adirondack Mountains in New York State, and we were backpacking there about 8 days back when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And just like, we went over all these different mountains, went past all these mountain ridges, we went through the forest, and everything just felt so big and so grand.
Yeah.
Whereas like, when I look at the mountains and I see the forests on the mountains in the States, I really see something that's like lush and big. Whereas like when I take the Shinkansen and I'm going through to Osaka and I'm passing by all the forests and I see the trees, it almost like reminds me of moss a little bit, like moss growing on the mountains, and like the texture is different.
I can see the shape. Yeah. I feel like, especially a lot of like the hills and mountains that are covered in trees here.
Yeah.
It's very like circular shaped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot like finer grade, I feel like. And so it's just something completely different, But I mean, to be honest though, I don't think I've ever been to a national park in the States. I've never been to Yellowstone, and I haven't seen any sort of grand nature like that in the States.
You never went to the peninsula in Washington?
I did go there, but I think you're not sorry, I'm thinking about the San Juan Islands now.
No.
Okay, never mind.
No, I'm talking about the peninsula.
No, I haven't been there.
It's weird to think about it, but Washington actually has a rainforest.
Yeah.
And in that rainforest, it's a cold rainforest, but it's still a rainforest. There's these massive sequoia trees, which are the redwood trees that are down in California. They have the same like 500 or 600-year-old trees over in Washington, and it's really cool. Yeah, nature's cool.
Yeah. I mean, so it's like, so for me, like being in Japan, like there have been a couple of times when I've been really moved by nature here. And one of them was when I went to Kyoto and I looked at Arashiyama, actually. When it was like a patchwork quilt of all these different colors just kind of flowing over the mountain. It was almost like someone had made like a quilt and just draped it over that mountain, Yeah. But like you say, it's almost like you're observing a painting.
Yeah.
And you see the small details. Everything's on a much smaller scale, But then again, I also feel like in Japan, people focus on enjoying nature more than in the United States.
Yeah. I think I would agree with that. I think there's a stronger emphasis to observe nature here in Japan, where I think in the US there's like people don't really go to look at nature, they go to experience nature.
Yeah.
Like a big thing in the US is going camping, right? And the idea of going camping is like not, we're going to go look at the trees. No, that's not doing that. It's like we're going to go experience the harshness of living outdoors.
Yeah.
Right? And we're going to go experience, like we're going to go hiking up a hill and like take in like the peacefulness of just being alone on a hill.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Where I feel like if I go hiking here in Japan, I'm going to go look at the view or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like I said earlier, I don't think one's better than the other, but they're very, very different goals when you're going out into nature.
Yeah. And I think that really I mean that really ties into like the culture and the difference in values. Like when I look at like ikebana, so like flower arrangement in the States versus here, right? So like so just as a full disclaimer, I just finished reading a book called The Book of Tea by Okakura Tenshin, who was actually one of the curators for the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. And he was the reason why they have their renowned like Japanese exhibit.
No.
But he was really big back in the Meiji era.
Yeah.
But he was sharing stories about like the difference in aesthetic sense. And he was saying how like there was this story about like Sen no Rikyu. Do you know who Sen no Rikyu is?
I do not.
He's the guy who started the tea ceremony
Okay.
thing. So you know like the tea ceremony
Yeah.
where so he's the one who kind of started that and popularized it. And there's a story about where he had a garden that was full of this kind of beautiful golden flower. I forget what it was.
Yeah.
And it was the talk of the town. And people really wanted to go see it, but it was his private garden. And he had a very distinguished guest coming who was really excited to see the garden full of this one kind of flower. And when he arrives to have tea with Sen no Rikyu, who's like the number one tea guy, he goes to the field to look at the flowers, and they've all been cut. All the flowers have been cut. All the buds are gone. There's not a single flower in the garden. And he's really pissed off, really angry. Like, why would you do this? I came here to see the flowers. There's no flowers. And so he walks into the tea room, and in the tokonoma is one flower, but it is like the best flower out of all of the flowers in that garden. And then he feels happy and he feels great about it. Because like, it's not like this overflowing, like, ato sareru? What do you call it? Overflowing, not...
Like overwhelming?
Overwhelming, yeah. It's not this overwhelming sense of seeing a sea of flowers, but it's this one small perfect flower that you really enjoy. Like, that's a big difference. Whereas in the States, people be like, what the heck did you just do? I want to see all the flowers, and you just have one for me? Yeah.
No, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah. Like, I remember, so my sister had us stay on the third floor in her house, and man, I'll show you pictures later, but my sister lives in a very large house.
Yes. It's like a ranch house, right?
It's like a mansion.
Okay.
And I mean like Western mansion, not
mansion, gote.
Yeah.
Right, it's a big mansion.
Yeah. But so we get put up on the third floor, and one of the windows overlooks the Cascade Mountain range.
Oh, wow.
So from literally as far as you can see this way to as far as you can see this way, it's just massive snow-capped mountains.
Man.
And they look so good, man.
Yeah.
Oh,
man.
Especially during like sunset, where the sun's kind of going behind the mountain range, and like everything's orange, and you have whites and kind of like bluish grays.
Yeah.
And, oh God, it's good.
So did you actually get to take part in like the farm life over there, or did you just kind of observe?
No. So we intended to, but as it turns out, we both got COVID as soon as we got there.
What?
Dude, it sucked. Like, I didn't even know I had COVID until I got back. But like, we got there and we were staying with my parents in Seattle, and everything was fine. And then once we got over to my sister's place, we were in Seattle for like almost a week at that point.
Okay.
And I didn't really get symptoms, but I was just tired all the time. And then my wife and my daughter like both had fevers and were just sick the whole time. But I mean, they still came out and interacted with people, so it's not like they were locked away the whole time. But both of us got sick. And so, like, you know, we had all these plans to do all these things, but like, we still did a couple things, but like, we just had no energy every day. So that kind of sucked. But
man. Well, hopefully next time when you go, you can experience that, because I would love to hear a little bit about, you know, farm life in the States, because, you know, I've never experienced that.
Well, I mean, I can give you some insights on it. People work really hard on farms. It is a lot of effort, and there's no days off.
Okay.
Like, every day you're waking up at 6 a.m. to go feed the horses and feed the other animals. You're making sure that no one's sick. You're making sure that like all the chickens are there, and like no animals were killed in the middle of the night. You're feeding like cats and stuff. You're spending like 2 hours feeding animals.
Okay.
Right. And then during the day, it's like, I don't know if my sister and her family have to really do this, but on normal farms, especially if you have livestock like cows, you have to rotate them.
Yeah, right.
Right? Because they'll eat all the grass. And I think my sister kind of has to deal with this because she has horses. But so you'll have all your animals eat the grass, and it's like You got to push them forward or else they'll kill the grass there.
Yeah, right.
Right? So it's like you got to like deal with like moving a bunch of animals during the day. You got to watch the chickens while they're coming out, like cuz there's a bunch of hawks and stuff. So it's just like a lot of like stuff to do on farms.
Yeah.
You know? And then at night, you have to do the same exact thing, like get everybody back into their sleeping area. And so it's like, it's a lot of work. Like if you live on a farm, and I'm sure it's the same in Japan, but if you live in a farm, like that is your job.
Yeah.
You don't go to work and then come back and do this. Like your job is taking care of the farm.
Yeah.
So, man.
Yeah, it's just, so it's funny because, my grandfather lived on a farm, you know, and so I've only heard stories, but so was there anything else you wanted to talk about this?
I think we pretty much covered everything I wanted to chat.
And we still have to keep a little bit more for the next episode.
Yeah, we're gonna just dig into that and power that out next episode.
Ah, crap! I did that already. Okay, I'll talk to you next time.
All right.